answer to that is yes. There are a lot of different initiatives that are going around right now in the FSI industry. What's interesting is to watch how various institutions are addressing the big data and how they pull it into their day-to-day operations. So, for example, some come in with very high expectation, fully expecting to see that they're going to get a very quick access to the kind of information they're looking forward to in their big data initiatives. And many times it turns out to be a little bit disappointing because they've not thought through the business side of that discussion. Usually the technical side is what's addressed at that particular point. But in FSI in general, we're seeing a lot of interest in that, and it's going forward in that regard. Not at all. And inside of a particular industry, you actually experience multiple different strategies. A typical strategy, come in, fill up, get a lot of data, a lot of information, but not a lot of thought goes into how and what you want to get out of it. So it turns out to be a huge repository of a lot of information, but turning it into something that's exciting for a business is still to be determined for a lot of people. Why? Because in a big data strategy, you might look at it as, I'm coming in, let's get as much data as we can. Other people or other companies go after it by taking bits and pieces at a time. Now there's pros and cons to both sides of these kind of strategies in adopting big data. And we're seeing a lot of that in the industry today. I think because the FSI market is a market that has traditionally been fairly manual across the globe in certain respects, the opportunity to make the changes and leverage big data is something that a lot of people misunderstand. Let me see if I can give a little bit more clarity around that. So for example, bringing all the data into the right repository, making sure we're getting the right kind of data that's relevant is one step in that process. Bringing it out in business context and making it usable in front of the right line of business managers is a completely different initiative. And what we find is that misunderstanding in many situations says that they've not thought through that process in such a way where it makes it easy to flow and make that happen. So those kind of things are underway right now, and we're noticing in FSI that those things are changing. There's a lot of upheaval. So what I'd like to say about FSI is we're seeing the Uberization of it. We've got crowdsourcing for funding or crowdfunding. All those kinds of things are putting a huge amount of disruption. So the access to that data is becoming more and more relevant. And what we're seeing is a lot of people don't necessarily think of what it means after you get the data as opposed to just getting the data itself. I think the best way to do it is to just start with the end in mind. It's not a matter of getting technologies put together. It's not even a matter of getting as much data as you can into a repository. It's about thinking about what the outcome should be. So that's a really important step. What is it that you're looking for? How are you servicing the customer any differently if you bring in that kind of insight or the ability to get that insight? So we see that as the beginning, if you will, is to start with the end in mind. And with that in mind, I think you'll see a dramatic change. Again, we would emphasize that getting big data in one place, making it usable from the very beginning is an important step. Then I would actually take an additional step and say it's about making sure that there's speed injected into the process. Not just in gathering the data, but taking the data itself, putting it into business context, and making it relevant as quickly as possible. And in the real world today, that can take days or weeks. In certain technologies, you can actually do this in a matter of a few seconds. So there's some very creative things happening in the industry right now.